You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent Fleskens, your host as always. Market is continuing to slow down in Perth with stock rising on a weekly basis, still way undersupplied in WA, and a bit of a two-speed economy opening up here where the good properties and the good suburbs are still seeing very good numbers and competition, and the properties that were always going to struggle, that haven't had much love, haven't been renovated, are on bad streets, are in undesirable suburbs, are taking longer than we've experienced for quite a while to sell, and sellers are going to have to start being more about the price they're bringing that property to market with. That's our update there. Transaction numbers are still sitting in the 600s. I'd like to see them in the 800s, but they're not in the 500s of what it was back pre-COVID. So that's probably a good indicator of where our market is currently sitting, waiting for that rate decision tomorrow after our inflation numbers last week came in positive, having been a little lower than the last numbers, but not as low as I'd like them to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a rate rise tomorrow, although I'm really hoping we don't, because that would be a kick in the guts for especially the East Coast, but also many people in WA. Let's move on to our chat today, and it is Nerd Alert time. Nerd Alert, we have Aaron Sice in the studio, WA's biggest property and construction nerd. He's the Assistant Director at the HIA, backing up Michael McGowan, doing some amazing work on reform. What I'd like everyone to know is that all the reform that John Kerry is talking to right now, is announcing, a lot of that came from this man's brain. And so what I'm trying to do today, Aaron, is unpack that insane amount of detail that sits in your brain into a very consumable, synthesized, explainable level of detail for everyone listening, including myself, so that we can get a lay of the land on what's happening, on how the rule book is starting to change and evolve, and hopefully for the better, given you designed it, for all of us who are in the game.
Challenge accepted. Yeah, thanks. There's actually a group of 10 of us inside this strategic advisory group, and it's not only myself, but it's also everyone from UDAA and PC, Property Council, right through to, and we've got different local government representatives in there as well. So there's a lot of us there that are really threshing a lot of this out.
So what you're saying is, if you're not happy with it, don't just blame Aaron. But if you love it, then yeah, you were running the show.
Yeah. No, but everyone has the opportunity to put a lot of things up. I guess I'm a bit more fortunate than most that a lot of the ideas that have come out of both my experience in industry, but also with my committee's experience in industry, it really does inform a lot of changes happening in that.
Guys in the bureaucracy, they respect you, they listen to you, and if they could just let you do their job, they probably would, which would be easier for all of us, to be honest. Let's move into the detail. First thing I want to talk about is the R-codes changes that were announced a few weeks ago.
Yep.
The big headline, 50,000 new houses. Minister Kerry was pretty open, saying, look, it's obviously not going to be 50,000 next week. It's not going to be 50,000 in 20 years, but 50,000 houses could get subdivided.
Absolutely.
If we all decided to as landowners tomorrow, and it made sense financially to do it. It won't for many houses, because the houses will be way too big or not in the right spot, or it just won't make sense for the financials in the suburb. But of that 50, maybe 10 to 20,000, you could put on a map and go, that'd work. How will it work? Can you give us a bit of an idea as to where you characterise these changes might be most obvious in terms of the suburbs, and what's actually changing in the code?
Yeah. So first up, what it's doing is it's targeting the subdivision potential of lots that are R20 and under. Now, R20 is 20 dwellings per hectare, and most of the default codings in the inner rings of the city have largely defaulted to R20 over the years. Now, what we have, though, in the fringes, when you do a greenfields or a new subdivision or a new housing estate, is they're typically R30 to R60. So the idea was, well, hang on a minute, if we've got smaller lots in the fringes and bigger lots in the city, that's kind of inverse to what we really want.
It's counterintuitive.
Well, it is, but Perth is known as being a garden city, and that's okay, but there's a time and a place and location for those ideologies. So we're now looking, I guess, as a state, at those areas that can better accommodate subdivision. Now, I say R20 and under.
Yeah, what about R15, R17.5, R10? Does it count for them too?
Absolutely. So
that's controversial, Aaron.
It is very controversial, but I guess it means that unless a local government can properly identify and properly construct an argument against the need for subdivision in particular areas, then that'll be pretty much a
We'll
default
talk to
outcome.
that because that's where massive controversy is going to come.
Huge
You're going to have
one.
some serious unhappy people in some suburbs. But what are the suburbs where you reckon people are going to go, yippee, thanks a lot?
For sure. So pretty much the entire city of Joondalup and that entire area has an R20 base coding. So places where I live, like Ocean Reef, that's a base code of R20 and lots of 700 and 800 square metre lots. But when you think about areas like that in the south, you could look at places like Booragoon, you could walk through Melville, Willetton, you could walk through Lynwood. Those kinds of areas are also on the target as well.
And the reason that they weren't subdividable before is because the blocks weren't big enough. They were developed at a time where we weren't doing quarter acres anymore. Maybe we were doing 700s or 800 square metres.
That's right.
And therefore the R20 just didn't tick over the numbers to be able to split it in half. Is the easier way to explain it?
R codes allow subdivision on an average lot area, and then you have to meet the minimums. And people get a bit confused about what that represents. So say for R20, the average lot area is 1 per 450 square metres.
So you'd need 900 square metres, if you just think very plainly about it,
Yep.
to subdivide that.
That's right. So if you're, say, for example, keeping the front house and you need, say, a common property driveway down the side, well then inside that 900, no lot can be less than 350.
And that's the minimum one. Yeah. So that's staying. You still need to have a minimum of 350. Is that
Yep.
staying? And then when you go down to R15 and R10, you still need their minimum.
There's, I think, 800 from memory. So you can't have a 350 square metre block in an R10 area. It will be an 800 square metre block.
Yeah, got you. So that might save some bacon in some of those very protected suburbs
Absolutely.
like your Menora, Coolbinia.
Mount Claremont, those, yep.
I think Dalkeith has some R17 and a half
Yep.
as well. But yeah, so straight away people's ears are pricking up going, hey, I live in the city of Joondalup. I live in Craigie. My mates west of Eddystone, they got to subdivide, but I'm east Eddystone. I never got to subdivide.
That's right.
Now he can.
If he meets the minimums. Now, it's
Well,
important.
couldn't he just knock the house down and do a side-by-side, Aaron?
Well, you absolutely could, because then that would meet the minimums. And I think that's part of the discussion as well, is that, okay, well, if you can get the same outcome, whether you meet minimums or averages, then why do you need the average? The average has always been there to account for common property. So that would still be on top of, for example, 100 square metre
Has it?
site.
I thought the averages were there to be used as a tool for managing swathes of density. So we know all these blocks are 800 square metres. We don't want them subdivided. We'll leave them as R20. These blocks over here, they're 800 square metres, but they're closer to the shops. We'll make them R25 or R30. I thought that culturally the codes were used not to factor in a driveway, but to literally just provide huge blocks of land that either could or couldn't be subdivided to certain density.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it from a bit more of a negative lens, that's definitely a way that it can
It's a
be
control
utilised.
measure because, for example,
Well,
R20
average.
in City of Bayswater, where a lot of those blocks were a quarter acre, means something different than R20 in the City of Joondalup, where most of those blocks were a sixth of an acre. And so you can subdivide at R20 in the City of Bayswater. You can't in Joondalup because the block sizes are smaller because they will develop later on in history.
Yeah, Hammersley's a great example of that.
Hammersley's a perfect example where the whole suburb is
680.
R20. But yeah, exactly right. And for the most part, no one's ever been able to subdivide in Hammersley other than using a corner lot bonus,
The corner lot
which we've
bonus.
spoken about in the past.
Yeah. So, yes, but the way that the minimum lot sizes have been getting more and more aggressive.
For affordability, to be frank.
Absolutely, but also it takes account for things like awkward lot shapes, etc. So if you look at it from more of a positive lens, it's actually encouraging infill by allowing smaller lot sizes to occur.
Yep.
But what we have seen, and I think it's very obvious when you look at the minister's map that he's laid out, the swathes of red that would now be subdivisible. If you look at, say, everything from Booragoon and Murdoch through Melville, Belmont, the west side of Mirrabooka, east side of Warwick, right out to the coast and all the way up to close to Clarkson, where everything's pretty much R20, all of this can now be opened up. And there are local centres in that area, and I think it's viable to think that Perth as a city within a 20 or a 25 kilometre ring would be reasonably subdivisible for most lots.
Is this the most pro-retirement fund policy the government's ever brought out for your run-of-the-mill mum and dad who have been sitting on their place in Mullaloo or Booragoon or Craigie for 30, 40 years, never really considering it was going to be a possibility, and then suddenly, oh my God, I don't need my backyard anymore, Keith, let's get rid of it and we can pull $400,000 out of our backyard and retire? It's just an opportunity for so many people.
It really is. But I think we need to be careful as well as that not every block can be developed in the same way. So if you've got a bigger house and it doesn't have the room out the back, anything you get rid of on a development site, you've got to pay to replace, right? If you bowl that front house over, you've got to pay to replace it at current rates.
Value.
You've lost that equity.
I guess the point is, if you're sitting on a mansion or a big 90s 4x2 that covered a lot of that block, this probably isn't for you.
Exactly.
But if you're sitting on a one from the 70s or 80s or a 4x1 and you've got 350 square metres in the backyard, this could be a game changer, a life changer.
It really could. And the funny thing about this as well is that people forget that ancillary dwellings are allowed on one per single house or one per group dwelling or a villa. So where you've got one house on, say, 800 square metres, which would maybe be 2 350 square metre blocks and a 100 square metre driveway, you can now get effectively 4 dwellings on that.
Just break that down a little bit more, because I know that was a medium density change, wasn't it?
Yeah, so you can put an ancillary dwelling on any single house, which is a granny flat, on any single house block or any group housing block.
Are we talking dual key or are we talking granny flat or both?
Either. So a granny flat or an ancillary dwelling, as they're technically known, can be either attached to, integrated with, as in built in part of, or detached from.
So
the
what
building.
you're saying is I could be sitting on my 3x1 on 800 square metres in Lynwood, and that 3x1 is sitting relatively to the front of the block. Up until now, I haven't been able to subdivide that backyard. It's just maintenance for me, and it is what it is. As of the 1st of July next year, I can put a subdivision application in to subdivide the back 350 square metres off. But instead of selling that block, I could go and put a dual key at the back, where that's essentially 2 dwellings at the back, making me rent, right, paying for itself. And if I still had space at the backyard of the front house, I could still put a granny flat in that backyard, that front house, if there was enough space too.
That's right. But the caveat there is enough space, right?
Yeah.
So it still has to meet the R codes. You can't just create a mining camp on a suburban block, right? You've got to do it nicely, correctly, and per the codes and per any LPPs. But if you've
one house could turn into 4 in a way.
One house can turn into 4 income streams, yeah. And then suddenly you've got a family compound in, I don't know, Forestdale or something like that.
Yeah. And again, you break that out to Hazelmere, for example, where I'm sitting on an acre.
Yep.
I mean, the outcomes start to look pretty mental. That is nearly a mining camp if you have an acre of land in Hazelmere, which is R20 in and of itself.
Yeah, but again, there might be caveats to developing it to R20. It might have to be connected to sewer, all those kinds of things as well. So those caveats can't be ignored, but the potential's there. But also, local governments, I dare say, between now and when this is expected to come in, which is about this time next year, will likely have to develop some sort of controls to maintain the character of these semi-rural areas or anything that they might have rezoned, but also maybe revisit some of the zonings.
Do you see all the local governments who are a bit anti-development scrambling right now to go, hey, we have to get a policy in on a local level now to start to protect those suburbs that we have zoned in a way that is not subdividable up until now, so that they can't be still going into the future?
Well, it's funny you say that, because the minister in the same announcement said that he expects any new local schemes that are put up for approval to have a minimum base coding of R30 unless appropriately justified otherwise. So we should start to see schemes within the metropolitan region schemes start to consolidate a little more with the greenfields and the housing estates that have a minimum R30, to start seeing areas move to a minimum R30s as well in those scheme amendments. So, for example, the city of Joondalup has a lot of split codes, but also has a lot of just plain R20. So they would be expected then to lift the zonings of, say, places like Heathridge, maybe the south parts of Mullaloo, etc., up to an R30 as a default. So even if they do leave R20s alone and those lower codes alone, that minimum subdivision potential should still be there. But as part of those scheme amendments, if they do try to bring those protective policies in place, they'll be expected to lift those, I guess.
So it's got to be a give and a take.
Yeah.
And that's what he said on the podcast. If you're going to be fiddling with your local planning policies now to try and cater for this announcement, we're open to the conversation. We do understand that there are areas that do want to be that prime dress circle, but you've got to give me something back somewhere else closer to a train station or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the state government's also taken control of the station precincts and announced, I think, 10 to start with. And that's, depending on the side of the fence you're on, it's a good or a bad thing. But when you see things like R40 that's opposite a train station, you've just got to start to ask the question, is that
appropriate?
Is it appropriate?
What do you achieve?
And this is the third shot at this local scheme and it's still R40. What's going on? Yeah.
Move on that. I think it's a pretty good wrap for people, and I think for all those small-scale developers out there, the mum and dad developers who just move around doing a subdivision every couple of years to work the nest egg, and you see a lot of them around Perth. A lot of ethnic people, a lot of Italians and Croatians and Indians getting on it these days. They've recognised that if you work a bit harder, take a bit of risk and do this sort of stuff in property, you can get ahead, right? I've seen it so many times, and I encourage people. This is what I've been participating in since I was 19 years old, is my first strategy. It certainly starts to provide a bit more opportunity, because I think the reality was, up until now, that stock of developable land and the small scale, house behind a house, was really dwindling, wasn't it? We'd nearly done it all. So this is just going to open up a brand new chapter of that for those people who aren't sophisticated or financial enough to go and do 6 townhouses, but still want to be able to put their money somewhere every year or two and do a project.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense for the smaller developer. Really will help people get ahead. I think with the changes to CGT on the way and those kinds of things as well, the ability to be able to put this stuff into your super and your nest egg is probably very attractive. But like I said, it's still not here yet. So if you are going to go out and go buy up half of Lynwood, then that's a risk I wouldn't want to take until there's actually a stamp on a piece of paper.
He's announced it in a way where it sort of feels rubber stamped already, though. This one seems like one of the most fait accompli policies ever. It still
has to go out to consultation, and we could find genuine issues with doing things like this. And I can already hear the community groups talking about things like trees in backyards and loss of suburban character and those kinds of things.
Big issue with it. Did you listen to it and prick your ears up and go, "Thanks, Brad"?
I do take what anyone says in a political space with a grain of salt, but...
He's got a point, though. As I've said on my pod with Minister Carey, it is nearly inevitable that when you're doing house behind a house devs, you are going to knock a tree down. There's no way around it, really, is there?
So many local governments have what's called a provisions or a model tree local planning policy. Now, WALGA, the WA Local Government Association, they drafted this one with legal advice so that every local government could adopt it. But what it does is it effectively creates a regulated tree for a tree that's over 8 metres in height, effectively. There's other small conditions that attach to it as well, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. So if you are getting rid of a smaller tree, you could probably get rid of it anyway. I can go down to a tree nursery and pick up a 4 metre tree tomorrow for $750, you know. So is a 4 metre tree a significant tree? Probably not. I can go buy it. But can I transplant an 8 metre tree? No. So that's a significant tree.
Is that a risk then, that people look at this, go, "Oh, beauty, I'm going to go out to Willetton tomorrow, buy a property that I can subdivide next year." Doesn't realise there's a 15-metre tree in the backyard. There's a local policy that Canning's gone and put in place to say you can cut them down.
I think about 10 local governments have adopted it.
Yeah, so is that a big risk that people need to look at?
Well, if you go and do it without approval that is needed, SAT have literally just ruled in favour recently of the model tree provisions. So it'll be really important to, if you've got one, to take notice of it. My advice is, those trees add a lot of value. If you buy a house that's got an established tree, I think everyone likes that. It adds value. So design around it. Treat it as an asset and design around it. I mean, there's no reason why you have to build something that's perfectly square in an infill space. And I've been saying to this to people for a long time, actually, is that start putting your money into the house instead of putting it into the block. So in other words, don't go out and just level the block and make it flat and put $60,000 into the ground. Keep the block, keep the trees, and put $60,000 into the house and design the house to suit the block, and you'll have a unique outcome. And from an owner-occupier perspective and from a livability perspective, that adds value.
Yeah, people pay for that unique nature as well.
They do. So put the money where it's going to get a return, not where it's just going to be easy.
Let's segue to the next bit, the streamlining bit. Our code is like 300 pages long now. It's ridiculous. You and I have spoken many times about how destructive these things are, and how hard it is even for the professionals on the government side to operate around. And I think they've just gotten so prescriptive that it's impossible to be imaginative, it's impossible to be creative, and it's creating very run-of-the-mill stock standard houses. Homogenous is the right word, yeah. But it's being created that way because there is a community of planners out there who don't want to get in trouble for making judgment calls and saying, "I like this, let's approve it." So they want to stand behind more prescription and say, "Well, our code say I can't do it, so I'm not going to," rather than just standing on their own 2 feet and saying, "This is why." And so that's why it's 300 pages long. Not because we needed it, but because the planning industry is not KPI'd to make decisions anymore. They're KPI'd to essentially process, and hopefully the decision's already in the paper. How do you strip that back culturally after years and years and years of another thing being added, another thing being another policy being Frankensteined on, to now get back to just trusting people to use their judgment and be pro-development.
Yeah, homogenous housing stock is not okay as far as I'm concerned.
It's a product of these R codes.
Well, so we need to think back to what the R codes originally represented, right? It was taking the big 80s 5x3 with a sunken games room and making slightly smaller versions of them to put into the back blocks of Osborne Park and that kind of thing to address housing needs, right? And it took with it all the controls that you would expect of a 5x3 into a small little villa, forgetting that when you live small, it's effectively an apartment with a courtyard. It's not a small house with the same size kitchen.
And the same liberties.
Exactly. And the same privacy rights and all these things, same setback requirements, etc. So part of this approach with originally Part C of the R codes, which was the whole medium density code change, was to redefine exactly what middle ring housing would look like or infill housing would look like. And there's another extension that's been announced, we've been working on for a while as part of this SAG group, the Strategic Advisory Group, is the splitting of the codes. So we'll effectively have one code for single houses, which is just one house on one block with no common property. And it's largely meant to affect things in new housing estates, etc., which are a very, very different beast to, say, a split block side by side in, say, Angelo Street, South Perth, right? It's a different thing. So the next code is the group dwelling code, and that will be able to prescribe infill outcomes that don't necessarily contradict or weigh on single houses.
But didn't we just do this 2 years ago with the medium density code?
Now, what we did is we split the one code into two, and we still had single houses grouped with group dwellings and multiple dwellings and that kind of thing. Whereas now we're going to split them up into single houses as one code or one chapter, group housing is the next chapter, and multi-dwellings is the next chapter, which are apartments or small walk-ups, whatever.
And what's the benefit we're going to get from all this? Because it just seems like, pick one, for God's sake.
Yeah, so what it does is, one, it allows streamlining of assessments. So what we can do is we can have effectively checks on assessments that are done much quicker because they're not grouping other elements. But there's another announcement that's just come in as of 2 days ago, that one that we've been working on through HIA for a long time. And this is an expansion of the exemptions from a DA. So if you're doing a standard house, you don't have to go to DA as long as you meet what's known currently as the deemed to comply provisions.
Which is very rare in infill rebuilds.
In infill environments, absolutely, completely agree. Because most single houses in infill environments, believe it or not, are actually a group dwelling because the title doesn't exist at the time that the DA was made. So that's two houses on one lot, a group dwelling, or they've got a common drive.
Or you're just knocking down an old house, building a new one, but you've got neighbours that you might be overlooking, or you want to do something special, architectural. It rarely meets, because it's 300 pages long, the massive prescription of you must build this house this way.
That's right.
So you step out of the boundaries. I need a little bit more space here. I'm going to give it up there. Bang, doesn't end to comply. DA, 60 days, stop the clock, turns into 4 or 5 months. Yeah. Every bloody time, man.
Yeah, so the idea is that those single houses are easier to design and easier to develop under the R codes, whereas if it's a group dwelling, then you can follow another pathway. Now, these exemptions from DAs can now expand up to 4 group dwellings on one lot, but also 4 apartments on one lot. So if you're doing one house behind another house, it doesn't matter whether that driveway is common property or not. As long as it meets deemed to comply provisions of the R codes, you can again go straight to building permit. You're not tripped into a DA assessment just because it's a group dwelling, and it functions exactly the same as a single house. So what these exemptions do is they expand the number of houses and the number of developments that don't need to go to planning anymore.
Which started a year or so ago on single houses themselves.
No, for single houses, it's been going since 2015.
When does that ever happen? Not in greenfields, Aaron.
The important part to remember in greenfields is that I'd say 95% of houses that go to greenfield sites go straight to building permit, because they follow the deemed to comply
provisions. There's project homes that have all been built to follow the deemed, so they can hit the ground 10 days after titles, right?
Exactly.
And that's easy.
In infill environments, it's very, very different.
But it always seems like all these changes have prioritised streamlining the house and land space. If you're in infill, suck eggs, you're doing something special, it's just what it is. And you're probably never deemed to comply, so you're going to have to go through a DA.
Yeah, so the reality is that within local, I guess, inner city local governments, there's lots of LPPs that can be attached to something that needs a DA.
Yep.
But if it doesn't need a DA, it's only what's in the scheme because it comes under these same exemption provisions.
Got ya.
So unless it's in the scheme, it has to be written into their scheme as a variation. It can't just be a tack on LPP. Then all of a sudden, these things become...
Okay, but then the point I guess I'm getting to, can we make the deemed to comply side less prescriptive?
Ultimately, yes. I would always push to make deemed to comply less prescriptive.
Is that what they're doing with the change to deemed exempt? And they're changing the wording there? Does that make any difference?
Well, the wording is to actually satiate the community, for lack of a better word, in that it's not deemed to comply. Like someone hasn't deemed it compliant. It's deemed exempt. It's exempt from assessment. Just that, which is exactly what deemed to comply is.
What about the dot points underneath that? Are they changing?
Yeah, well, there are a number of different changes that are coming for deemed to comply.
Yeah.
One of the bigger ones is actually the removal of site cover from the medium density space. Now, that means that you'll only be limited by your required outdoor living area size, your setbacks, your heights, and the way it presents to the street, right? So setbacks. Site cover, or that percentage of footprint, effective
50%?
Yeah, that will disappear from those medium density codes. Now, that's on the cards.
So that could have been one of the triggers for a DA. That's gone.
Absolutely.
Any others?
Well, there's actually a massive list that was released recently. So the other one is the simplification of lot boundary setbacks. So it's going to be very, very simple. So basically...
Because that was getting a bit silly.
Those tables were incredibly difficult to work
Based
through.
on wall height, how high you were, is second story, overlooking, window here, not window there, how long's the wall. It was this huge matrix.
Absolutely. So basically up to 3.5 metres, it'll just be a metre. If it's up to 7 metres, it'll be 1.5 metres. If it's above 7 metres, it'll be 3 metres.
Okay.
It just simplifies things like that.
What about if you want a parapet wall?
And so now those allowances have also been expanded, so you can have 2/3 of a boundary to 2 or 3 boundaries. So again, making better use of the space of the block. But in the same breath, you're still providing the minimum amenity for the occupant in the setbacks and the streetscape from the front setbacks and the open space that they have, courtyards and all kinds of things. The site cover or the open space, whichever one you want to call it, was really just this sort of secondary overlay check. In my opinion, it should have been part of a design principles assessment. But
well, if you're doing one, you should be okay with the other. But right?
From an occupant's perspective, does it matter if you're 2% over or not? If you've got
from a
what you need in a
perspective,
courtyard,
if you've got your parapet walls not
and you're not
meeting,
overlooking your neighbours, what does it matter?
In what way are they ever going to perceive that you're 58% instead of 55%?
Exactly. And unfortunately, then things like that go out for advertising. Someone's non-compliant.
They're unhappy with the toilet over here, which has nothing to do with the 58%, which was the reason it triggered.
And then suddenly everyone in the neighbourhood's got a copy of your floor plan.
Yep.
They know where your safe is. They know where your bedroom windows are.
Yep.
It's not a good look. So the other one is also visual privacy. So previously, many people developing property would understand what a cone of vision is, right? You'd look out and be quite generous. Even overlooking a driveway might have triggered a development assessment. Whereas now the visual privacy cones of visions have changed. So if you're overlooking dead areas like driveways or garage roofs or that kind of thing, it's not considered as part of that overlooking.
Because it's not a privacy problem.
It's not a privacy problem, exactly. If someone else develops there, then that building that is now built, which is yours, is established, and they'll have to consider how they want to address that. So it's not about maintaining the rights of that block. It's about maintaining how you live in those inner city or those closer environments. Yeah.
So it's just trying to bring some pragmatism into all this.
100%.
But also simplifying at the same time.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. I think you can build pragmatism in by building more prescription. But this is trying to take it away.
In fact, I'd probably go one further. I'd say it's maintaining the prescription, but just making it more realistic so that if you are overlooking someone's bedroom window, that's a problem, right? And we know that's a problem. Yeah. But if you're overlooking their roof,
who cares?
Literally, who cares? Oh, but you're over the boundary straight to DA. No, there's no need for that. Yeah.
Okay. I think those things, they're a win, definitely.
Well, there's another one that's flagged, which is really interesting and I think might upset the apple cart as well. And there's a proposal to allow R40 to 3 stories.
Ah, that's right. Yeah. So I find that progressive. And I had a bit of an eyebrow raise on that because previously that was withheld for R60 and above. It could have been R50. I don't think anything's ever been zoned R50
I think there's like 3 areas in Perth that are
which is again strange. What's the point of having it if you're not going to use it?
Yeah.
There's a question. And often they just go to 3 stories because they had to because of the square metre size of the land. They couldn't fit.
We're getting down to 150, 120 square metres of land. That's right.
So what we're thinking is at R40 with a block size that's minimum 180, 3rd story, you could be fitting a lot more family home square meterage here on a 3rd story if you only had 180 square metres.
Yeah, agreed.
Does that then create issues again for setbacks, overlooking? all that
Yeah, well,
stuff.
like I said, if you're doing a wall height over 7 metres, you'll need that 3 metre setback. So if you've only got a little narrow block, say it's a 10 by 18, right? 3 metres off either side,
Got nothing
a little
left.
4 metre slot up top.
What do we do with that then?
Really, again, the site cover is proposed to be removed. You might be able to spread out a little bit more on the other 2 floors to accommodate that. But if you've got more of what an R40 corner block style represents, where you might have, say, a 15 by 15 or a 12 by 15, that's a whole living room upstairs, right? So that's a different kettle of fish. And I think that needs to be considered. And I don't think that we will see a great deal of R40 pushing 3 floors.
Because of construction cost?
Number one, that's exactly where I was going. Construction cost really will start pushing things higher. And especially if you start talking about apartments, you're now getting into what's called a different type from a fire perspective. So you move out of your concessional fire size into a standard fire size, and that changes costs considerably. We start talking about sprinklers and dampers.
That
and all
starts
kinds of
at
stuff.
4 levels, doesn't it?
No, it begins at 3.
Then no one's going to do it because no one's going to put a pump station in. No one's going to put sprinklers in.
Well, you might not need pump stations depending where the hydrant is, that kind of thing. But smaller apartment blocks will probably still be 2 stories to take advantage of what's known as Type C. But I think with the personal housing or the young families or even the more established families, empty nesters, you probably find it's more the owner-occupiers that will want that 3rd floor as a loft or whatever it ends up representing.
Yeah, I think it's great kids playing space, for
100%,
example.
100%. And it's worthwhile considering, I think.
A study.
An extra storage.
When you
right?
think about the way that Europeans live, so many of them utilise that attic for just a multi-purpose room. Many things over their lifetime. It was a sewing place, and now it's the office, and now it's where the kids do their acrobatics. And
yeah, and if you think about where we used to be with attics in Perth, they were always the hottest room of the house. Sorry, 7 Stars has kind of knocked that on the head, so it's probably going to be quite a nice conditioned space. Yeah.
Okay, so look, I guess, again, this is more optionality for developers to offer products to the market and families to go, well, hang on, maybe we could see ourselves living on 200 square metres of land.
Yeah, if I can get an extra floor. You look at some of the interesting lots in the centre of Sydney and those kind of places, some of them are down to 50 and 60
Well,
metres.
they're all walk up, walk down.
But they're stories high as,
Paddington,
as family homes.
perfect example. Been around for 100 years.
Yeah, tiny blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. But what's next?
There's site works and retaining walls has always been a really big one in the lower codes. You've always been limited to 1/2 metre of variation, whether it's excavation or fill.
As in trying to bring a site up or down to meet the level space.
It just meets
where it used to
some
be on.
buildable sort of level, yeah.
So if we can build it back, you got your natural ground level. It's defined by your survey. You've always been limited 1 metre or 1/2 metre.
Okay.
You can't augment your natural ground level by more than 1/2 metre up
Yeah,
or down.
cut or fill, yep. That's what behind the street setback line you can cut as much as you want, but you can't fill.
Okay.
So it's but 1/2 metre's been the limit. In the old medium, well now the current medium density code is Part C, but in that we push from that to be 1 metre, in the knowledge that infill lots are not all flat, right? They're weird shapes, especially the R40 sections through Melville. They've got some incredible slope as well. So we're now pushing to get the site levels at 1 metre no matter where you are, because if we are talking about developing R20 blocks at minimum in infill areas and bringing everything up to R30. We're going to see a lot more infill development, and 1/2 metre is just not realistic anymore. Even if you wanted to put a house behind a house in somewhere like Karrinyup, think about the slope behind the shops there down to the lake. You know, that's a huge difference for those sort of areas. And
So more retaining walls.
or just allowing the building to be stepped a bit more, something like if you want to work with the lay of the land. The idea is that it's not triggering DAs for things that are really not your fault. And really shouldn't have a contextual discussion, because at the end of the day, the slope's there. Why are we having a contextual decision?
Yeah, what did you expect me to do? You gave me the zoning to infill. What am I doing with this now?
What am I doing with this land? Exactly, yeah. So it doesn't penalise the neighbourhood by recognising those slopes in those areas.
Aaron, one of the more controversial ones I think that people are going to start recognising is the removal of minimum parking numbers. Now, I've been through the ringer on this historically, needing to have minimum amount of parking. And the funny thing is, you see around most of the world massive numbers of apartment buildings that have no parking. And no one's complaining. Everyone just lives a life without a car. They live a life connected to public transport, and that's their choice. The people who buy and rent there choose that. They're comfortable with it, and the people who develop it do it because they believe there's a market for it. We do live in a state where the reality is the second you turn 17, if you have your license, you have freedom. And if you don't, you are stuck in a very inefficient public transport system.
I'm going through that now.
Chicken and egg situation, right? So everyone has a car. If you want to go see your girlfriend, you drive. You have to park outside her house. Now, if there are swathes of streets that are zoned for medium density, for walk-ups, for three-storey apartment blocks, things like that, which I hope we see more of in the future. Stuff like the River Vales and the Nollamaras that we saw a little bit of back in the day. And there are many of them that already just have one parking bay where two people live with two cars and the streets are blocked up. What does it look like when there's no parking bays? Where do the inevitable cars go?
Yeah, it's not really targeted at that kind of development.
But it allows for it.
It may do, but I think you would find that anyone securing advice ahead of part of a feasibility study would suggest the number of bays that they would need. I think a lot of people, back when the plot ratio announcements were announced for multi-dwellings, got a bit ahead of themselves, and you start to see that. And there are apartments in Dayton that have one car bay and there's no train station, right? And that's where Part C is trying to say, okay, we really don't want that kind of built form. We really need them to be nice. And to an extent, that's a good idea, having those sort of amenity-style buildings. But I don't think it's designed for that. It's more there's a development block on Bennett Street in East Perth, and we want to have 12 of the 36 apartments with no car bays.
Yeah.
And allowing that as just deemed to comply or deemed
without
exempt.
it being something a lot of them about. Yeah.
I did a development right next to the train station many, many years ago now for 12 apartments. Literally, it was staring at the train station and I needed 12 car bays. And that's in a city. And you think to yourself, well, surely I could have just done a 50% car bay concession or something like that. And everyone was saying at the time, this is the perfect spot to have no car bays. But it was still forced upon me. So there's those issues.
I agree. It should be development-led. It should be market-led. Minister Kerry is very correct about that. And I'm all for free markets. Don't get me wrong. I would rather have this than have the prescription. But it's probably less of a concern about the relaxing itself and more about just what are we going to do about it as a culture when we've got streets out there that are already full simply with one car bay because the husband and wife both have their own cars in that two-bedroom apartment. What are we going to do about it as a community generally?
It's part of that choice you make as a consumer as to what you buy and what you're happy to have.
What about money being spent at a local government level to create more street bays rather than it being a verge no one looks after in the first place?
I would love to see that. And I think part of the neighbourhood design, which is the new livable neighbourhoods subdivision design, actually will have streetscape modelling that allows for on-street bays and street parking off the carriage but still within the reserve and those kinds of...
If you're going to facilitate no off-street parking, you have to have on-street parking. You have to be able to facilitate it one way or another because there will be the cars. And that's where I'm leading to with that conversation is right now, because we don't facilitate for the on-street parking in the places like Rivervale, all the cars just park on the street. Or just park on the carriageway itself and you're running around all these cars on both sides of the street.
Yeah, and there's two schools of thoughts on this. One is that it is difficult for emergency services to navigate and there's a problem there. But on the other side, roads are for cars and parking big metal things covering black asphalt that is a heat sink might actually have some level of urban cooling. There's all different kinds of arguments about where it should go and where it shouldn't go.
Well, I think it should go on the verges. Let's throw them all on the verges. If you're going to have to spend money on DCPs, on developer contributions around the state in infill spaces, it should go straight towards turning those unused verges that the developers, that the apartment block striders aren't looking after, and give me 2 car bays.
And again, then you just place those street trees around those bays like we do currently. Like you walk down half the streets in centre of Fremantle, they've got bays hugging street trees, etc. Yeah. It's the character of the area.
And there's the shade for the cars.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. That'd be great. But there's the other piece there as well, is that it talks to also affordable housing. So the development of affordable housing may or may not have a car bay attached to them. And
it's cheaper with no car bay, obviously.
That's right. So if someone is not necessarily subject to transport poverty, they can buy a property where they have their electric scooter and they catch Ubers when they need to, rather than have to have a car or have to purchase a space that they probably can't rent out because of the strata bylaws.
Yeah, got you. Well, mate, before we get too deep and too dirty, let's wrap it up. Last thing I wanted to ask is, how many R20 blocks have you purchased in the last couple of weeks?
None. No, definitely not a hope and pray investor.
Okay.
I'll see value and develop it, but I hope and pray is not an investment strategy.
Well, I reckon there will be a bunch of people who are looking at this as their next investment strategy in the suburbs you've spoken about, they'll listen to this and go, that's exactly where I'm looking right now on realestate.com. And they'll be thanking you from afar.
Again, it's not just me. It's coming from all of us. All of us in the industry are largely aligned on these outcomes, which is quite shocking, actually. We don't have a lot of fighting in these meetings. We're all very much aligned on what Perth needs, which is very, very encouraging.
It is encouraging, but if we had 20 more of you, I think we'd get things done 20 times faster. So thanks for your time, mate. Thanks for explaining that in layman's terms for the Dummy's Guide to what just happened in the R-code space over the last month. And hopefully enough people out there get enough value to be able to do something about that. Go buy yourself an R20 block in Craigie or Ocean Reef or Heathridge or Lynwood or Booragoon and see how that underlying value will change for you simply because of the flick of a pen from John Kerry in 11 months from now.
I don't think he'd be encouraging anyone just yet, but a flick of a pen is definitely very apt.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!